Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new Washed Out album, Purple Noon. Washed Out, aka Ernest Green, legendary Chillwave pioneer, and for a long time, one of the real true giants in the genre. And there was a time where this guy meant absolutely everything to me, to the point where every time I was driving in the car, it was either the High Times EP or the Within and Without album or the Life of Leisure EP spinning in my car. His early EPs to this day, honestly, still remain some of the best examples of Chillwave ever. And for a while, it seemed like he was on quite the roll with his studio albums as well. While not as hazy and psychedelic and lo-fi, I thought his Within and Without studio album debut had a lot going for it. I love the themes of passion. I love the very glistening synths on this album. And while not as hazy, once again, I loved the bright and summery feels on 2013's Paralyzed as well. It would be 4 more years until I heard again from Washed Out, and honestly, when he did return, I was very upset. In 2017, he came out with Mr. Mellow, an album that had killer singles leading up to it. Excited the hell out of me. It was on Stone's Throw of all labels, which excited me even more, and the result was only about 20 minutes of new material and some half-assed interludes. Now, leading up to this new album, Purple Noon, a lot of people haven't been as high on these new singles to me, and I fear deep down that it's probably just nostalgia, but I have liked most of them quite a bit. Let's chat about Purple Noon. This album starts off with Too Late, and spoiler alert, you know what? Overall, this is not Ernest's best album by far, but I still think this is a really killer track. It's just so smooth, so syrupy. I love the sort of twilight glow that's surrounding this track, and not to mention, it's just so passionate. And honestly, I might be in the minority here, but I think Ernest's vocals sound great. Also, this chorus is just so freaking huge. I mean, it is larger than life. Now, I will say this, the hazy, psychedelic, lo-fi production of Ernest's earlier work seems to be further away from ever. That ship has certainly sailed. But for a single from Washed Out in 2020, I love this. I mean, say what you will, when this album is good, I still think Ernest can write a hell of a tune. Personally, I enjoy Face Up quite a bit, too. It kind of sounds like a more stripped-down version of something that we would have heard on Within and Without. It has this amateurish charm to it as well that I actually kind of like. Now, I will say this, I feel like this track is underwritten, but I think that he makes up for that in a really lovely atmosphere on this track. It's sultry, it's sweet, and once again, very passionate. Not to mention, that twilight glow of a lot of the tracks on this album is really infectious. It's perfect for sunset. I do like that. Time to Walk Away, on the other hand, is a little bit more hip, a little bit more playful, but it's still a hazy, beautiful, washed out track, albeit a little bit more of a heartbroken one for a change. It's Ernest's vocals on this one that really reel me in. I just can't help but just kind of melt away with them. It's just so silky and smooth and sounds like a natural progression for Ernest. And Paralyzed, to me, sort of comes off like a fusion for Washed Out. It kind of has the passion of his Within and Without album, but also has the sort of ambient side of Paralyzed. And the result is pretty likable. Now, I will say this about this track. It's kind of apparent by now that this isn't coming to Ernest as easy as it did many years ago. Don't worry, we'll get there later on in the album, trust me. But for now, the grooves are real, and honestly, this track takes me back to a simpler time. And Reckless Desires as well. I kind of like the way this track breaks up the album. It's a little playful. It sort of lifts the cloud of this album just a little much, give it a little levity. And let me tell you, while I feel like Ernest still isn't himself, I think he could still very easily put together a big, glorious hook. Oh boy, but sadly, the second half of this album in its entirety is just enough to break me, man. Game of Chance is, wow, really bad. Not only is it one of the worst songs I've heard all year, I think it's one of the worst tracks Ernest has ever written. The thought of Ernest Green, Washed Out, bringing him some more organic instrumentation, it's just, you know, it's inevitable. It's going to happen, even for the father, the godfather of Chillwave. But oh good lord, hearing him on this teary-eyed acoustic ballad is really hard to listen to. It's pathetic and it's sappy and just not the direction I want to hear from him at all. Back to the drawing board, please. With Leave You Behind, it's becoming obvious this album is taking a massive turn for the worse. Ernest's music has always kind of had some sorrowful undertones, but it's always, you know, at least been meant to be that way. This just sounds like Ernest was getting his teeth pulled playing this. He sounds miserable. He sounds like he didn't even want to record this. I mean, the chorus is pretty decent. That's kind of a callback to simpler times. But overall, for me, this is not worth it. With Don't Go, on the other hand, I think he's trying too hard. The instrumental here is one of the busiest and most psychedelic of the bunch. And honestly, it sounds out of place. It sounds like Ernest is desperately trying to make up for lost time. Once again, these verses are so boring. This is one of the longest tracks here, and let me tell you, it feels like it. And there is no progression. You can forget about that. And you know what? It's sad, because every once in a while on this track, honestly, I feel like Ernest hits one or two notes that send chills down my spine and remind me why I loved his stuff to begin with. But he, by now, has written this track 20 times, and those other 20 times are all much better than this. Now, I do really actually, commend the more upbeat groove on the track Hide. I think that's actually pretty good. It's certainly something that this album needed. But to me, Ernest, once again, sounds like he would be anywhere in the world but the recording studio right now. And this chorus, which could have been really good, ends up just being a snooze. And you know what? The psychedelic undertones of Haunt actually give me a little hope. But Ernest's lovelorn croons of old have literally become these bored, misshapen shadows of their former selves. Once again, moments on these, little snippets of vocals and a beat that tug at my heartstrings and remind me of what I loved about Ernest's music growing up. And you know what? I will say this. There are some vocals towards the end that are much more impressive. He's actually onto something there. But it's not the same. This album is a sad state, and honestly, no wonder Chillwave isn't a thing anymore. So you know what? The first half of this album is actually pretty impressive. I still think that when Ernest puts his mind to it, he can write a seriously great, passionate, dreamy Chillwave track for the ages that reminds you of what he can do. But the second half of this album completely goes off the rails. He ends up sounding bored, half-stoned, and about 10 other things, completely uninterested with his music right now. And that's just kind of upsetting to me, especially, someone who really lived for Washed Out's music years ago. I'm feeling a decent 6 on this album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you like the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.